Thank you, President, and I'm pleased to rise to speak to the Primary Industries Legislation Amendment Bill, which, as the previous speakers have mentioned, this is largely an omnibus bill that covers many areas of the industry. In fact, it's very diverse, and it really covers everything that's been on my plate all week. I must say, I'm on the SARC and with Mrs MacArthur here, and I think this was probably one of the liveliest SARC meetings, was going through the Primary Industries Amendment Bill, which does seem remarkable. Really, it does seem remarkable. There was much conversation about broilers. And, I think some disappointment that part of our history is now gone. I recognise that it was probably gone 15 years ago, but we are seeing the end of the broiler, recognising the broiler industry. I think where we got very detailed was with the amendments to the Dairy Act. And of course, when you start thinking about what animals do provide milk, well, the mind went. And I couldn't help thinking of a film with Robert De Niro in it called Meet the Fockers. And I don't know if many people recall the milking the cat scene in that film.
And you got to say Fokker on.
I did. And in milking the cat, well, I'm certainly that my good friend and colleague, Mr. Medic, would not be supportive of cat milking, but I am now intrigued by it. And then when we turned to discussing camel milk and what did it taste like. I understand camel chocolate tastes like caramel.
Oh.
Thank you, Ms. Pulford. Apparently camel chocolate is awesome. I then had this recollection that isn't camel milk used as a beauty product, and Mr. Quilty then reminded me of that. But the real beauty milk is donkey milk. And I'm looking forward to a Victorian industry in donkey milk, because that's what Cleopatra used to maintain her beauty. She bathed in the milk of 700 donkeys. I'm not sure that was a daily basis or a monthly basis. I'm not sure how often the Egyptians did bathe. But the bill did give great rise to many conversations, and I think it was. There was some concerns in it, but I think also from the Northern Metropolitan region, bringing the Melbourne Market Authority Act into line with the fact that the Melbourne market has moved, and it moved a couple of years ago. So I think bringing it into line, and also allowing the authority to make those decisions about when it meets, if it needs to meet, and various other areas. The main area that I would really like to focus on today is the amendments to the Drugs, Poisons and Controlled Substances Act. And I'll just ask maybe if my amendments could be circulated at this time.
Oh, is she there?
Thank you. Now, as many of you will know, and I'm extremely pleased that the government has done this, and I'm feel very pleased to be part of a cross-party task force with Minister Symes and Ms. Cupper in the other place, and the task of the task force is to look at how we can grow and promote the Victorian hemp industry. It's a burgeoning industry. It's one where there is, I think we have a great deal of optimism for what it could be. And as many of us know, and I'm sure many of us have started, investigating hemp products, whether that's hemp seed on our breakfast or our yogurt, or whether that's hemp clothing. We're seeing hemp really come into the marketplace, and there were some recent changes to our food regulation which allowed for hemp seed to be used as a food rather than it for everything else. I used to buy my hemp seed from my local grocery store, but over the packet it had a sticker on it saying that this was for body scrubbing, not for eating. They now don't have to put that sticker on it, and you can now eat the hemp seed. But there is many other potentials for this industry. And we know that hemp is stronger than cotton. It requires less water to grow. It has, it's a softer product, and it certainly is a far more environmentally friendly product to produce. And I think and also in looking at this, in looking at where else we can go, in looking at hemp plastics, in looking at hempcrete, in looking at hemp in so many other areas, in looking at hemp as a biomass fuel, the options, this plant is rather spectacular in the variety of uses that it can be. However, for some reason, industrial hemp and the licensing of growing industrial hemp sits within the Drug, Poisons and Controlled Substances Act. Now, let's be very clear. Hemp is not marijuana. If you were to smoke hemp, nothing would happen. You may get a cough, but there is no psychoactive substances in hemp. There is no reason why hemp shouldn't be treated as any other any other product that is a fibre product, such as cotton or other fibre products. But at the moment, it is licensed, and it is very strictly licensed. Every single hemp crop must be investigated. It must be it must be sampled. It must be checked by Agriculture Victoria for any THC content to ensure that it has a very, very, very low content. This must be done in accordance with a whole bunch of regulations. The sample mustn't exceed 0.35% THC, which is actually the lowest percentage in the country. Now, it seems that the unspoken reason for hemp being in the Drugs Act is that somehow people will sneak in some marijuana plants in their hemp crops and grow those and not be caught. Frankly, that's just not possible. So even if you were to sneakily put in some illicit marijuana plants in there, the fact that it would cross-pollinate with hemp would make those plants null and void and not worth smoking them anyway. So this just doesn't work. So with respect, and I have had conversations with the Minister about this, but I do think that these added conditions on the licensing of hemp cultivars is not necessary, and it will possibly discourage people from entering into the hemp market. The consequences of these amendments, the consequences of this bill, is that we will treat hemp in the same way as we treat alkaloid opium poppies. Now, if you were to smoke one of those poppies, you wouldn't get high, you would die. And we have seen that in Tasmania. This is opium. These are poppies that are creating a very, very strong medication. And Australia is one of the leaders, and Victoria has a growing poppy industry, and I think that's very valuable. But to consider hemp the same as the poppy industry makes very little sense. And so my amendments to this legislation are very simple, that effectively we repeal the amendments to make it like that. So the offences that now the meaning of offence in the legislation as it is proposed would mean that a hemp grower who had a son-in-law who may have been picked up for having a joint and had been prosecuted for the possession of a drug would not be able to have a licence. Now, these are companies who are now on the stock exchange. These are companies who are growing, and I think we need to be encouraging these companies. We need to move beyond still try to treat them as if they are somehow involved in the illicit market, because that is not what they are. They are now getting involved in the plastics market. They're now getting involved in the building market. They're now getting involved in the food market. They're now getting involved in the cosmetics market. These are companies and farms that have great potential. I am encouraged by some of the conversations I've had with the Minister, but I would, with respect, encourage the government to reconsider Clause 7 in this legislation, and certainly consider removing it from there. In fact, I don't think hemp should be in the Drugs, Poisons and Controlled Substances Act anyway. It should just be in the Primary Industries Act. And so I'm putting these amendments up here today. I think I'm confident that this industry has a great future in Victoria, and I know the task force is very committed to ensuring that that occurs, that we grow this industry, that Victoria becomes the leader in not only the hemp industry but in hemp technology, in hemp research, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. We're seeing car manufacturers, we're seeing we're seeing aeroplane manufacturers turning to hemp as a product to replace things like carbon fibres, to replace even things like aluminium. So it's got a great potential. I encourage the government to reconsider the clauses that further stymie the licensing of this industry, further, I think, send the wrong message about what this industry is. And while I appreciate that we are working hard, and we have met with many people in the industry, and we've learned a lot about the potential and the expansion of this industry and the optimism out there for something to grow, I feel that this legislation, possibly inadvertently and possibly because it has been sitting on someone's table for a number of years now, at least a year, that maybe this hadn't been rethought in light of new information. So while I'm very interested in the bill, I'm interested in releasing the donkey milk, and and the camel milk. I would hope that my amendments would be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.